the secret engine of empire. How money built Britannia. Picture this, a small, rain-soaked island off the coast of Europe somehow conquers a quarter of the world. How? Most people will tell you about warships, brave soldiers, and ruthless colonizers. But that's not the real story. The truth? Britain's empire was built with something far more powerful than cannons. Money. Not just gold coins, but a revolutionary system that turned debt into dominance and credit into conquest. This is the story they don't teach you. This is about how London bankers figured out how to finance an empire and created a playbook that still runs the world today. England's desperate beginning. Let's rewind to the 1600s. England was nobody. Spain controlled the Americas. Portugal ruled trade routes to Asia. France was powerful. The Dutch were the real financial geniuses with thriving markets and fleets dominating the seas. England? A disaster. Constant wars had drained the treasury. Kings borrowed money and simply didn't pay it back. Nobody trusted them. Without credit, you can't fund armies. Without armies, you're nothing. By the late 1600s, England was broke. Then everything changed. The 1694 Revolution. In 1694, England created the Bank of England. Sounds boring, right? But this changed everything. Here's the genius. Wealthy investors would lend money to the government and receive bonds, IOUs with guaranteed interest. The Bank of England managed it all, ensuring everyone got paid. Suddenly, lending to England wasn't a gamble. It was safe, predictable, and profitable. For the first time ever, England could borrow massive amounts at reasonable rates whenever needed. Other countries borrowed the old way, messy, expensive, unreliable. England had invented a financial cheat code. War became an economic game. War stopped being just about armies. It became about who could afford to keep fighting. The War of Spanish Succession. England fought France and Spain for over a decade. How? Not more soldiers. They had unlimited credit. British investors kept lending because they knew they'd be repaid. Government collected trade taxes and paid bondholders. The cycle was perfect. Trade funded debt, debt funded war, war expanded trade. France defaulted repeatedly. Interest rates skyrocketed. Eventually, they ran out of money. Britain won because it could afford to fight after everyone else went broke. The self-feeding monster. By the mid-1700s, the system was perfected. During the 7 Years' War, Britain borrowed over £100 million to fight on 4 continents simultaneously. France was bigger, richer, more populous. But they couldn't match Britain's borrowing power. The war bankrupted France so badly it triggered the French Revolution. Britain emerged controlling North America, the Caribbean, and India. More territory meant more trade, more taxes, easier loan repayment, and even more lending next time. Genius. And brutal. The East India Company. Private empire. Here's where it gets dark. The East India Company wasn't a normal business. It was a corporation, government, and army combined. London investors bought shares expecting profits from spices and silk. But those profits came from conquest. The company had its own army, bigger than Britain's actual army. They bribed rulers, waged wars, and extracted taxes from millions of Indians. All that wealth flowed to London bankers and shareholders. Think about that. A private company ran a colonial empire, and it was completely legal, profitable, and backed by London's financial system. Napoleon's fatal weakness. Fast forward to Napoleon. 2 decades of war. Europe in chaos. Napoleon was a military genius, but he had one fatal flaw: money. He relied on looting conquered territories. Britain just kept borrowing. Over £600 million total. Half the government's budget went to paying debt interest. But investors never lost faith. Why? Britain's industrial revolution was booming. the money would definitely get repaid. Napoleon didn't lose on the battlefield first. He lost in the counting houses. Waterloo was inevitable once his credit died. Who really paid? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Ordinary people paid for everything. British citizens were taxed on tea, sugar, tobacco. Prices rose so wealthy bondholders collected interest. The empire wasn't funded by rich investors. It was funded by working poor paying inflated prices. Overseas? Even worse. India suffered massive famines while grain was exported to global markets. Why? Because feeding bondholders was more profitable than feeding Indians. This is the hidden violence of finance. It doesn't look like conquest. It looks like trade, markets, economics. But the result is the same. Wealth flows up, suffering flows down. Finance as weapon. The Opium Wars. By the 1800s, Britain realized something crucial. Sometimes you don't need armies. You just need banks. The Opium Wars prove this. Britain loved Chinese tea and silk. Problem: China only accepted silver, draining British reserves. Solution: British merchants, backed by London financiers, sold opium to China. Indian opium from British territory. Profits were enormous. When China tried stopping the drug trade, Britain sent warships and forced ports open. Result: China humiliated, British trade exploding, profits flooding London banks. Empire through finance. No occupation needed. Just control the trade, control the money, extract the wealth. London, global financial center. By mid-1800s, Britain was the world's banker. British banks financed Argentine railroads, South African mines, Caribbean plantations. The pound sterling became the global currency. This was the gold standard era. Britain tied currency to gold, projecting absolute stability. But here's the trick. Want British capital? Play by British rules. Align your currency. Follow their policies. Let British gunboats ensure debts get paid. Empire by spreadsheet. The system that never died. Here's why this matters today. The financial system Britain built in the 1600s never disappeared. It evolved. When governments borrow trillions today, that's the same system. Wars funded with debt instead of taxes. Same playbook. Financial crises destroying ordinary people while bondholders stay protected. Same logic. Britain lost its empire, but the model survived. It moved to New York, then went global. World War I, financed by debt. World War II, same formula, but now America was the lender using Britain's own system. Today, quantitative easing, sovereign debt crises, international bailouts. Same system, bigger numbers. The uncomfortable truth. Who holds power now? Global debt exceeds $300 trillion. Wars continue for decades, always well-funded. Financial bubbles burst, wiping out savings, but big players always survive. Have we escaped Britain's system? Or are we still trapped inside it? The mechanisms are more complex, players have changed, but the fundamental dynamic remains. Those who control credit, issue debt, and set financial terms, they shape the world. Your shield. Financial literacy isn't optional. It's survival. Understanding how money and power intertwine protects you from the same forces that built empires and crushed nations. When you hear about necessary austerity, ask, who profits? When inflation surges, ask, who benefits? When crises erupt, ask, who designed this system? History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. And if you don't understand the patterns, you'll be swept away. Britain's bankers understood something profound. Real power doesn't come from owning land. It comes from controlling money flow. They built a system lasting centuries, outliving every general and king. That system is still here. Will you understand it or be consumed by it? History isn't dead, it's just wearing a different disguise.